Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Playing with Power podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things CEDH, EDH, and Magic the Gathering. I am your host, TK.
I'm the guest today, Matt Sperling from Playing with Power. Sorry, I didn't know that was my cue.
So
Missed a beat there.
This is Matt. Everybody, Matt Sperling is a member of Playing with Power. He's going to be helping me today with this episode. Incredibly accomplished Magic the Gathering player, among many other things. I'll let him tell you guys who he is. But yeah, today we are going to be pretty much going over how to tell if your deck is CEDH or not. We're going to try and go over the intricacies, the nuances of like properly scaling your deck for the format and kind of being able to switch over to one side or the other if you wanted to. But before we get into that, let's dig into our sponsors. Our merchandise is now available in our store. We have dice, coins, tokens, sleeves, and more all available. Go to playingwithpowermtg.com and help support the channel. If you are looking for t-shirts, we also have a bonfire store. We have cool designs available and all purchases help out the channel. You can also support us on Patreon. Patrons get access to our Discord, webcam league, playdays, early access to videos, names in the credits of our show, exclusive videos, merchandise, and the ability to be on an episode. There are tiers for everyone, so go to patreon.com/playingwithpowermtg and help support the show. If you're looking to sponsor the podcast, please reach out in the email listed below. Now, Matt, dude, this is like our first time actually being able to talk like one-on-one, I think. We played, I think, a couple games on the channel before, but never really been able to like sit down, dude. And I'm excited. You want to tell everybody, just like a intro, who you are and everything?
Sure. I mean, most importantly, I was a Playing with Power patron before I joined the team, and I thought it was even before I had any aspiration of joining the team, I thought it was a good value and a great way to find other folks that play CDH and other formats. So definitely another, just to underscore your plug there. But no, I've been a Magic player for a long time, a Pro Tour level player for over 20 years. I have over $250,000 in Magic the Gathering prize winnings from tournaments. And I've played many formats over the years. Right now, I'm on a bit of a CDH kick. And so I think that's been a passion that actually has been awesome. It lets you, or lets me, I should say, scratch the competitive itch. At the same time, it lets you sort of do a lot of the cool things about that Commander is great at, building decks around a Commander that are thematic, or going deeper and deeper with card swaps, just maybe starting with someone else's list or a precon and doing upgrades. I mean, a lot of the stuff that's fun about Commanders there. So unlocking that has been a cool part of the journey here, but it's a long Magic journey, and there's been a lot of fun stops along the way for me.
Yeah, man, I'm super excited to have you. Love being able to pick other people's brains. Like I said, we haven't been able to actually sit down one-on-one and have a chat. So I'm also excited about that. But also, like I said, just amazing player in the community. So definitely happy to pick your brain today for everybody. But the topic of today, specifically, it's a topic that I know you are very excited about talking about as well, is finding the distinction of whether your deck is CEDH viable or not. Is it there? Is it there? What is CEDH viable, essentially? So I guess that's kind of where we should start, right? Is really dictating the difference between what is high power EDH, as people, like to call it, your 8s, your 9s, things like that, if you're going by the number scale, and what dictates CEDH. So like in your mind specifically, as someone who's, dipping into the format, what is the distinction there?
Yeah, first of all, really interesting problem, because, I mean, coming from a world of standard, modern, vintage, you don't spend any time wondering, is this a legacy deck or a vintage deck? Because these formats have different rules of deck construction, and that those rules create sort of bright boundaries. And this Commander just doesn't have that. So people end up spending time, even whether you're talking about the difference between a 3 and a 6, or in this case, we're sort of talking about 9 versus 10 plus. I mean, either way, you can end up in a sort of a debate, or you could end up with hurt feelings if it's just people didn't have a debate, they just showed up and started playing, and then you end up in a different space. So the nice thing about CDH, because it exists on one extreme end of that spectrum, it has some benefit. You can't miss high. I mean, so there's only one direction you can miss. That's awesome.
Right.
And that's actually a huge benefit that CDH has that you don't get in this. If you're building a 6, you can miss either direction. You could accidentally build an 8. You can accidentally build a 4. Now, so that's kind of what we're talking about. Hopefully that helps people orient themselves to like what we're talking about. But that doesn't solve the problem. You still can show up with an 8, right? So what is that? For me, it's, it's sort of, I think, centers around, we are trying to win the game, but also it's like, well, that's not enough, because you might be trying to win the game with your 6 power level deck, but it's really, I'm not pulling any punches. I'm using all the tools available to me. I've got the whole tool belt available. I'm not doing any sort of self-restricting, and that's what I mean by pulling punches. I'm sort of letting myself have carte blanche to do the most powerful thing I can think of. Now, there's some debate about whether, and we'll get into this, like about, what does that mean? You have to pick a certain commander or not? Well, people disagree about that, but by and large, what we're talking about is in CDH, you're not pulling any punches. You're trying as hard as you reasonably can within a certain constraint to win the game and to try to win every game that you play.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely. I think one of the biggest things that I like to tell people when they're trying to understand, okay, well, is this technically CEDH? Is this high power? Okay, what is your intentions? And are you actively, is it an active intention or is it passive? Like, because obviously it's a game, right? Somebody has to win at the end of the day. And so sitting down in a pod and being like, yeah, I would like to win this game, but I'm going to do it doing this fun, silly combo that I thought up and brewed up. Yeah, okay, that's good. And yeah, it might be really good at doing that, your deck, whatever you built. But is it consistent? Are you building it for tournament play? Is it something that, is intentionally being built for that purpose of winning the game? Or is it something that you're doing? You know what I mean? Like get into that whole thing. Yeah. It's really hard.
Yeah, and then, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
The intention thing is really interesting to me. I mean, that you brought that up. I wasn't thinking about it that way, but it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. And it does help. It helps you. Part of the conversation for me, the tricky part that it helps with is, look, I might see someone playing a deck that I don't personally feel is strong enough that I would bring it to a tournament. But that can't really be how we define the form, because that's not how it works in any format, right? I mean, I show up to normal tournaments. I play modern tournaments. I play Legacy. Yeah. I play Standard. I see decks all the time that I don't personally think are strong enough to play in my next Standard tournament. Does that mean it's not a Standard deck? Of course not, right? So I think you're right to sort of talk about, well, do they have an intention to try to win the tournament when they register it, or are they just trying to have fun? And that might help me figure out, is this a tournament level deck or not? Is this a CDH deck? So I kind of like that. I like that you've introduced that into the framework. I hadn't thought of that. Right. But it's important to think about those types of questions. Like, is this a deck that if I entered it into a tournament, I would be doing so because I felt like I had winning chances, because I put that effort in and the deck's powerful enough? Because there might be some concepts and ideas, like you said, where I want to make this combo work. Well, if it's a powerful enough combo, the result might be a CDH deck. But if it's not a powerful enough, and so that's where intention does sort of fall short. It's not enough. I can't simply desire with all my heart to make this, this Voltron hexproof deck. I mean, as much as my intention is to make that CDH, it may not be. So it's an interesting trade-off there. But I find that a fun way of unpacking it, though.
Yeah. It's hard to really distinguish the two, because, to your point, if someone does have the intentions of bringing, I don't know, a random commander, I don't want to joke on anybody's commander, because I'll probably save something being like, oh yeah, this is not CDH. And then someone in the comments is going to be like, dude, what are you talking about?
Yeah, use one of the vanilla legends from Jasmine Boreal or something, something that's just completely, yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. Somebody, could bring that, your Jasmine deck and is like, oh, yeah, I have every intention of winning this here. That doesn't mean it's a good CEDH deck, but if we're going off of intention in their mind, clearly, they believe it is. But I do like what you said specifically of not pulling any punches. I think it's the unrestrained deck building portion of it that really turns it into CEDH. Of me being able to look at the entire card pool of what's available in Commander and being, okay, I am willing to use whatever is here on this list. Nothing is off limits, which is something, and it's interesting now that we're thinking about it too, because, with your experience in 60 card format, that's kind of something that's inherent, right? Is, okay, whatever's legal here, I'm going to use.
It's not. Yeah, there's a book I recommend to any listener that's free online called Play to Win or Playing to Win by David Serlin. I'm going to look it up so I make sure I get that right. I think it's Playing to Win. So Serlin's Playing to Win, and it's an amazing book that really talks about how the key concept here, and I think it really applies to CDH versus non-CDH Commander, is like, there's no such thing as a cheesy strategy. There's no Dockside's just so cheesy that I don't think that's a legitimate way to win. I'm not going to put it in my red deck. It's like, no. Your red deck, guess what's going in your deck? You're going to put Dockside in there. I'm sorry. It's going in there. And and so that book really can help folks who have that sentiment of like, I want to get into CDH, but just the things just, and there's a freedom within that, I think, because it frees you up from having to argue with yourself and others about what's cheesy, what's not, what's in bounds and out of bounds. That's what I'm talking, like the freedom that you experience. And some people feel like, well, no, that's really restrictive because now I can't put my own goblin and I got to put this specific goblin in every deck. Well, there's still a lot of deck building going on. So anyways, I don't want to take us too far off the rails, but I thought that analogy to like fighting games and a cheesy move that you shouldn't, it's like, get rid of that. If you want to play CDH or competitive fighting games or competitive 60 card formats, you have to get rid of that mindset and get into we're trying to win here.
Yeah. I love the fighting game analogy. That's one that I use a lot when I'm talking to people of the format. Is like CDH feels very similar to I'm someone who's been in the Tekken scene, and so it feels very similar to high level Tekken play and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, sure, this wall combo might be very cheesy because of the amount of frames that it takes for me to pull off. No other character can do it, but it wins, and that's what I'm trying to do. That's really where it's at. And whereas in casual, you're trying to kind of frame this play experience for everybody who's available. I think in competitive, the real distinction, at least for me, is we're not really trying to frame this sort of play experience and craft it for everyone. We're just playing the game as it is here in the rules. As long as it's in there and it follows the rules as written by the commander, guidelines, then cool, it's good. Yeah, you can do it. And
and look, and I would only push back on that a little bit to say, look, we talked about Jasmine Boreal, right? And there's obviously there's a big gap, but there's a whole spectrum between Jasmine Boreal and Rogsai or whatever, or Sisay, whatever was clearly CDH, and there's many decks that are, and I don't know. I mean, there's somewhere I don't even know. I don't know exactly where there's a commander that's so fundamentally weak that it doesn't make a CDH deck. And maybe there's not that many of them. And if somebody said, I don't think about that way, and as long as the 99 is going as hard as it can, then fine. If Jasmine Boreal is your favorite character, then I'm down to call that CDH. Other folks say, no, you haven't gotten there yet. That's high power. I mean, where do you fall on that? Does your commander have to sort of clear a certain bar before just building around it with the intention of going as hard as you can is enough? How do you think about that?
That's really interesting. I think for me, what's really shifted my opinion on this is seeing other people play commanders simply for color advantage, simply for cost efficiency. Sometimes, the reason why Rogsai is so good, specifically as we were talking about it before, is the fact that it's not that Rograk gives you any sort of card advantage initially, other than the fact that it turns on all your things at once. Yeah. Other than that, the rest of the 99 is standard Grixis pile. And so I think while commanders obviously are going to have a really big impact on how this deck is going to function. I think there are like a good amount of commanders as well that just functionally are more, you're really going to rely on your 99 more than anything else. Because the amount of times I've cast Silas off of Rocks, I don't ever want to do that, but it's there and it serves a function. It's weird. I would say I lean more to like,
people don't. I mean, yeah, that makes sense. And I think people you probably don't have to worry about it too much because you're probably going to pick a commander that's like strong enough. And I've seen people in tournaments play totally like reasonable decks that do have a commander that doesn't look like a CDH commander. I mean, there's 6 mana commanders that have a landfall ability, draw a card, or whatever. And it's like, doesn't look like it would be aimed at CDH. It looks way more like a 7, 8, 9 type of deck. But if it's built, if it's going hard enough, you're probably fine. And relatively infrequently, well, I'll say this. More times I've felt like, hey, this person the game was cheapened because their deck wasn't maybe, it's been about the 99 more often. I'll just say that because I feel like somebody has sort of not, their deck just they didn't tune it hard enough. They didn't go hard enough. It didn't have the right tools. So it's interesting. I guess it's possible to miss either way if you pick Jasmine Boreal or you don't have your 99 too. But I think people more often probably get in trouble with the 99.
Yeah, 100%. Because more often than not, those are the cards you're going to see, often is the 7 cards in your hand rather than the one commander that you're playing. So I guess that makes sense to a degree as well. And once you said that, that really kind of cemented it in my mind. I've had many like spell table games where people have came with like, oh yeah, this commander is really powerful. Like there's a tier of commanders that I think a lot of people just in their minds are like, yeah, of course that can be CDH because it's so powerful. Like OG Atraxa, Feather, things like that are not, you won't see in CDH because of just how they're built or anything, but they're really powerful and they'll bring those commanders like, yeah, I can hang with the table. And it's like, no, because even though, you're playing Feather and Feather's a really strong commander, your 99 is all of those budget cantrips and everything that you see. And it's not going to matter when I detutor. Yeah.
And that's interesting because, in that case, it's sort of like, the problem started with the commander selection because it demands that you play a certain strategy. And I mentioned earlier, like Voltron, I mean, similar thing. Like I'm sure there are plenty of commanders that are probably pretty powerful on the kitchen table because they're hexproof and you start slapping things on. Now it's 25 hexproof, trample, lifelink. That's not going to play in CDH. And I think, so it's sort of both. I mean, your problem started with the one commander, but then in the 99 it didn't give you enough room to play. But so if you want to get into CDH, look at the strategies other people are using, the cards that show up time and again. Does my commander allow me to play a number of those cards they're popular for a reason, right? These cards that people, so it's probably not a great deck if it's just playing something totally different. Not that it can't ever be. Maybe there's something cool there that maybe the combo's fast enough and hey, I'm doing my own thing. But probably not. So I think that those are good things to point out for folks who maybe going up the ladder.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that being said, then I guess we could move on to really talking about what it is for us that really makes a CDH deck versus a high power deck. What specifically are the parameters? What would you say in your mind is the checklist to make sure, okay, this is a CDH deck. This is what I'm looking for when I'm trying to go to a tournament or, an invitational or something like that?
Yeah, I think one of them is understanding what it takes to win in multiplayer Magic and pushing the envelope in the direction. Now, there's more than one way to win. We know Thassa's Oracle is one way, but you could build a big creature. If you got the right mix of cards, you could be, Ishai could get big. And so there's one way to win, but understanding in general, what does it take in multiplayer Magic, and am I pushing hard in that direction? So it's just sort of like the intent to win decisively, and then there's also parameters around, quickly, because again, there's plenty of powerful stuff that shows up in a really powerful way, turn 5, turn 6, turn 7, but doesn't necessarily play out that way, in multiplayer. Now that additionally, multiplayer among people trying to win before the others do, it's going to put a lot of pressure on you to do it quickly.
Yeah.
So absolutely. I think that for me is one of the hallmarks.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you there for sure. I think the thing that I really agree there is the idea of winning decisively, because I've seen so many people who, are at their LGS or everything and are like, this is a very powerful deck, and it doesn't win. It just makes the game terrible. It doesn't win, but then we all draw, or like, that's not necessarily a thing. Where we're not trying to go for draws here. We want to win and win decisively. Well, how do you win? Like, yeah, there are stacks, combat damage lists, that win through combat damage. That's still a decisive way to win. Whether it's, your Thassa's Oracle combo, whether it's your Breach, lines, whether it's Hoarding Broodlord or, your Protean Hulk combos, whatever it is, there's a path in which you recognize in that list. This is how I definitively win the game. I'm not trying to draw it. I'm not trying to just make it hard for everybody at the table. No, I'm going to do this A, B, C, and I win. So I agree with that 100%. Yep.
Exactly. And if you're not using one of the most popular ways to win, a Thassa's Oracle, a Breach, if you're not using, then you're at least doing stuff that makes it so that stuff is not going to work. So stacks is like, well, I'm going to play cards that make it so that stuff's not going to work consistently, right? So I'm going to and there's an argument that there's some decks that are sort of parasitic or whatever that, but whatever. You've got, at least your deck is powerful enough that it's not, it's got something going on that can actually play on that playing field. And it's not going to just be consistently outclassed game after game. It's consistently outclassed because it doesn't have the right interaction. It's not playing these fast combos. It can't really go over the top. It can't really go under. It just sort of can't keep up. That's where you run into some trouble. So it's like, if I don't have those most commonly played ways to win, I better have something else going on that offsets that in a meaningful way, in a real way that lets me have chances on a consistent basis. Otherwise, I'm just not going to win anything close to my expected 25% of the games I play.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I guess also talking about that too is like the speed in which you're supposed to be winning as well. Like you said, stacks is there, but I think the distinction for me is turn 3 really tends to be the transition between early game to mid game in CEDH for me. And so I feel for most decks to be considered CEDH, for me, your deck has to be either being on its way to presenting a win by turn 3 and or stopping somebody from presenting a win by turn 3. On average, obviously, and there's variance.
Possibly stopping multiple players, because even a deck that was equipped to, so playing the right tools that scale the right way. That's what stacks. That's the only reason why a stacks deck can be entered into a tournament, is because there are certain things you can do that will actually scale the right way. If it's rule of law, deafening silence, for example, will say each player is going to have trouble going off. Like, that stuff becomes really important. Whereas, in other forms of Magic or more casual, I mean, maybe it's just about I got a little bit of removal. Maybe I'll be able to make this person's life a little bit more difficult and that person's life, pick and choose. That's not really going to get you anywhere on a consistent basis if that's all you've got. So, yeah, I think that's right. Like, you have to have a game plan on one of these axes that's really powerful and scales the right way in multiplayer.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, the whole multiplayer thing is really big too, because you could have a really good focus strategy that's like, yeah, I'm going to be able to take a person out in one swing. Like, a Kaalia deck can play, what's the card that they cheat in and it immediately turns their life to 1, and then you swing with Kaalia as well, and so they're dead. It's stuff like that, and that's cool. It's cute, synergy, but you also have to be able to win against 3 opponents. There's 3 other people at the table. You can kill one person really great. Now there's 2 other people who just saw you kill somebody and are like, yeah, you gotta go. you have to be able to defend against that. And I think that's really good too.
It's a good example because I don't know the name of that card either, but it's sort of neither here nor there. The point is you're making choices with your Kaalia deck, and that's a viable CDH deck, but you've got to make the choices that let you win the game sort of on the spot. And there are demons and dragons that'll get you there, or not dragons, but there are what is it? Demons, angels. Is it dragons?
Anyways, I think it is dragons. Yeah.
You can get there. I think the demons are the most powerful in CDH. So you're going to choose those cards, the Razakeths and, those sorts of creatures. Now, that's an example where, maybe in high power, you're using that to ramp out a big board. And now you've got this like dominating board and you got some fun combos that are going to be really splashy when they win, and you don't just deal 40 damage to the table, you deal 40,000 damage to the table. But in CDH, 40 to the table is usually about the same as 40,000, and so that's that's a mindset switch also, right? Whereas maybe in high power, everyone agrees it's cooler to deal the 40,000, but 40 might be enough in CDH because you're trying to get the job done.
Yeah. I think that's a really good transition into like what do we think a casual deck is too, because right there, like with that play specifically, like the mindset is, I'm winning the game, but I'm winning the game in the most fun and flashy way possible. I'm doing it. The intention there is not just winning the game, it's winning the game in a way that is fun, and in the pilot enjoyment is the forefront. Whereas I'm enjoying myself when I'm playing CEH, don't get me wrong, but I see so many people like comment on our videos and everything else too, like, oh, another Thassa's Oracle win, blah, 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 blah. And it may not be the best or flashiest combo all the time, but it's gonna win the game. And that's what's at the forefront of my mind now, is not, oh man, I could do this infinite Dockside loop and then do like a Eternal Witness lightning bolt. That would be really cool. But I could also just cast Thassa's Oracle here and win the game. So that intention of, is my overall enjoyment at the forefront, like pilot enjoyment and like play style is at the forefront, versus my ability to command this game and win.
And there's a hidden complexity and richness that outsiders and onlookers won't always see, because I want to say most. I mean, I don't have data to support that, but in at least a healthy number of the games that Thassa's Oracle wins, if another player had played perfectly and negotiated with the table perfectly, that they could have either won with their own Thassa's Oracle or something else, or stopped it. Most would be making it up, but at least in a huge chunk of those games. And so what does that tell you? That even there's a lot of richness to the game and choices that matter, even if, maybe the last thing that happened was the same from this game to that game, or from this version of the game to that version. There's going to be a lot there. So I think that's one aspect of it, is you have to enjoy and appreciate, the art of, like we're talking about with playing and win, just sort of like, the art of just like, did you win? And if you tell your friend who plays CDH, I won 5 out of the 6 games I played yesterday. Like, that's a story. Like, that's something that I can brag about. But whereas if I'm playing casual, like, okay, tell me more. Like, well, what happened? Like, were the games fun? Did your deck do the thing you thought it was gonna do? Did people get mana screwed? Like, but if I'm in the CD, again, it's like, that's enough. Like, hey, cool, man, good job. You won those 5 games. Did you make top 16? Like, what's going on? Great. Mm-hmm. So I think that, again, it's really a mindset switch from casual to this type of competitive play. But there's a lot of richness that's there that you might not get if you're just a casual observer of it and you just say, hey, well, so what? You went 5-1. That doesn't mean it was cool. So that's an example I would use as well, describing the difference.
Yeah, 100%. The stories change immediately once the environment is different. Because if I say I'm 5-1 in a CEDH competitive area, then it's like, oh, awesome, cool. How did it go? What strategies? What would you do next time? How did you play? Things of that become immediately important versus, oh, I'm 5-1 on Friday Night Magic. Okay, cool. It sounds like you're pub stomping, dude. Like stuff like that. You're doing too much. Like, there's a different thought process there when it comes to stuff like that. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, the the manner in which you win, like, yeah, it's like you said. I mean, there are things you can be proud of that aren't just I won, but it's more about like, just the art of like, another analogy I find useful and fun to talk about is sort of, regular Commander. Some of it is like showing off how cool your sword looks, and look at this, like this shiny steel and this cool like embroidery on the hilt and all this other stuff. Whereas like CDH is about actually cutting your opponent, right? And can I actually cut my opponent? And so it's just different. It's like, someone may feel like, well, I didn't think of this Underworld Breach combo, so it doesn't feel that cool to win with it. And if that's how you feel, I mean, look, it's always possible that CDH isn't for you, but I found like there's so many different paths to get to that combo, and there's so many things you have to fight through, the right interaction, and maybe I had to make a deal with somebody else to get rid of that stacks piece to give me that one turn window. And so it's the same. I keep coming back to the same thing, but it's really important is like that richness that's there that you unlock once you're actually on that playing field, on that battlefield. You're trying to cut your opponent. It's just a different dance. And yeah, it doesn't scratch the same itch as like, check out this cool sword. And that's cool too. Like there's a lot of awesome stuff that goes into like that kind of like show and tell kind of magic and cool stuff going on. Like, I'm not saying you can't have fun doing that. I'm just saying it's a different kind of fun, and you don't want to mix the two. You don't want to bring your sword that the coolest thing about it is how creative it is, when we're trying to sort of we're trying to engage in more of a street fight. So anyways, that's like an analogy I found helpful especially when I'm talking to somebody who's coming from like the Commander world and they've got like a box of Commander decks that they're really proud of. A lot of times the things that they're proud of about what's in that box won't necessarily translate over.
Absolutely. So pretty much what Matt's saying, and I'm going to co-sign on this, bring your pet cards and I will trash them 100%. They bring your pet cards and they're getting thrashed. No, I'm kidding.
But you got to find new pet. You can still have pet cards, but you're going to have to find new pet cards from among the subset of cards that are really, really, really strong. And you can have a pet card in there. I mean, people have pet card Protean Hulk. People have pet card Rograk. People have pet card, Jessica's Will or whatever else, and that's okay. Like, because you still have flexibility to build in certain directions, but it's not. Again, you can't show up to that sword fight with holding a foot-long sandwich. There are some you're going to have to be somewhat constrained, but you can find new pet cards. You can find new favorites. Don't worry. We're not going to make you play a deck that you printed off the internet yesterday. Like, it's okay. You can do your own thing. It's just it's going to be a certain kind of thing.
Absolutely. The image of someone pulling up to like a sword fight with like a huge Subway sandwich and it's like, yeah, guys, I'm ready. It's hilarious to me.
It might work if it's almost closing time. That bread's been out for a while. It could work. It gets pretty hard, but yeah, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I guess now, we've kind of talked about the distinction between like what we consider a CEDH deck versus what's a casual, more high power deck. So I think now is a good time to transition into scaling.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Card Conduit. Do you have extra cards lying around that you don't use? Want to buy or trade for some extra cards but don't know how to maximize the value? Then you should try out Card Conduit. Card Conduit is the best service when it comes to selling your extra cards. Don't waste hours trying to find the best buy list price for your cards online. Simply send them to Card Conduit and let them take care of the rest. I've used Card Conduit multiple times already. I always use them to get the best value of my extra cards. I get fair prices for my cards and they save me tons of time. They have 3 main services. Their standard service lets you send them unsorted cards of any value. They will sort, grade, and give you the best buy list price for your cards. Their curated service is similar. Send them your unsorted cards worth over $1 in value. They will charge half of the fee of the standard service and charge no fee per card. Their new sorted service is a great value as well. Choose cards in advance with their selection tool, send them sorted to Card Conduit, and they will grade and buy list them automatically. Save yourself the time of having to send to multiple sites and let Card Conduit do it instead. Their fee is only 2% with no fee per card. They give you the best price for your cards. They work with competitive buy listing partners, including ones not open to the public. Users get an average of 19% more for their collection than they would have from a major retail buy list, even with Card Conduit's fees. Card Conduit also optimizes buy listing for card condition as well. Since vendors have different penalties for wear and tear, Card Conduit will find the best buy list price against the specific condition of a card. So give Card Conduit a try today. If you sign up with my link in the show notes or the description, or use the promo code POWER, you'll also get 10% off their fees when you use their service. A big thanks to Card Conduit for sponsoring today's podcast.
If I have a high power deck and I want to turn it into a CAH deck, or I have a CDH deck, and I've been pub stomping, maybe I power it down. What are the steps to get there? How do I know when that's the case? Things of that nature. Yeah. So I guess in your words, when do you think is a good time to scale up your deck? Like, okay, cool. I've had this deck. It's been winning. I think I'm ready for CEH. What are the steps to evaluating that?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, like some indicators are, folks are sick of you at the level you're at. Like you find yourself wanting to reach for a different deck because this one's just too powerful. Other folks are sort of, you can tell they sort of roll their eyes when they see that commander come out of the box. Like, it's just time to sort of, and stepping up. That's an indicator that you might want to take a deck and step up in level. I mean, stepping a deck up maybe means the opposite. So I might be confusing my terms, but either way, we'll start with one and get to the other. So I'm talking about like taking a deck to the next level. Means like going and playing it with other stronger decks, like maybe trying to make a few changes. And I think like the best, I can save my tips for like how to get it there, but that's what I'm looking for, is like that feeling of like it's not quite a fair fight. So let me go try to find a more fair fight with that deck. And I may need to make some changes that I'll talk about how to make those changes, but I want to go find a more fair fight because I'm just like, this pool that I'm in, I'm just sort of swimming a little bit too hard in there. That's an indicator for me.
Yeah, 100% agreed. I think you'll know for sure, especially if it's in person. If you're going to your LGS with your play group and you constantly bring out that deck and everybody's like, oh, here we go, like he's bringing out Corvold again, oh great, we're about to lose by turn 3, turn 4, this is great. Once you start hearing that and people don't want to play with that deck anymore, that's a good indicator that, okay, yeah, either this needs to bump up and I gotta find, some competitive spaces to play this, or I gotta evaluate and power down. Other people tend to be the best barometers for that, I would say.
And sometimes you're feeling also like, you've enjoyed, I'm going to use the sword analogy again, forgive me. You've enjoyed sharpening the sword, like making it play better and better, like cutting the inefficient pieces. Like you've enjoyed that. Like you've enjoyed making Corvold go from 7, 8, 9, but now it's like, maybe it's arguably too sharp, which is what we just talked about, or you just really want to see like, how sharp could I get this thing, right? How powerful could I get it? Like, what is the actual ceiling of power level within the EDH rule set for this deck? Like if that's the itch that you're looking to scratch, like CDH is a place where you can go to try to get there, right? So I think that's another, just sort of checking in with yourself and like what's been fun about the process of building with that commander. Like if what's been fun feels like sharpening the sword, then that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess on the flip side of that, then, powering down is, kind of the opposite, where you're in this area and you see that everybody else is kind of playing a certain style and you are trying to fit in this play group. Fit in sounds wild because it's like, you could just find more friends, but also like these are your friends, ideally, and people that you want to hang out with and play these games with, and you want to play this strategy. Okay, cool. Corvold is a really good example just because it is a powerful commander inherently, just because of its abilities, and then it can be powered up to CAH levels. I think
indicators for me, if when your deck starts doing its thing, it's just sort of like the game is sort of over. It's like a foregone conclusion, or it's just sort of like there's not a lot of give and take to it once your deck starts doing its thing. I mean, the indicators that, okay, maybe I need to sort of make the deck do a different thing or not get there so fast. I mean, different ways of powering down and sort of getting ready to play in a different pool in the opposite direction. Yeah, like. Now, I'm not someone who has a ton of experience with that because obviously, like I've spent many years just trying to go up as hard as I could. But I've definitely been frustrated by this, though. When I have tried to dip my toes in that water, like I do get frustrated because I don't want to miss high or miss low. And so a lot of times I've just said, this isn't for me, but I think I'm missing out on a lot of fun because I haven't maybe invested as much time as I could have in like doing that. So it's been cool to like I've done a little bit of pre-con battling, and that's helpful because it helps you get into that mode a little bit. You're less nervous about did I go too hard or not hard enough.
Right.
But yeah, definitely like when I felt weird about it and felt like, man, I missed the mark. It was like, the stuff I'm doing feels like I'm just outclassing other folks, or if I need to go, I keep forgetting which one's power up and which one's power down, but either way, you'll tell the stuff I'm doing, even when I get there, it's not getting there. Like I still become a spectator, right? So I do my thing, and then I find myself watching 3 other players do things that are twice as powerful, and then I sort of count some moral victory and go home. Indicator that, okay, maybe I need to, again, I forget which is power up, power down, but I got to get into either the right swim lane or get this deck improved.
Yeah. And there's a lot of indicators for sure. And I've been through there too, as well, as someone who also came from like 60 card formats before even like touching Commander. It's hard to like have that barometer there of like, okay, cool. Is this okay? Because I think this deck is really cool. And once I start drawing, I'm winning the game. And everybody, you just see the light like die out of everybody else's eyes around you. Like, oh man, like I really wanted to make more squirrels with Chatterfang, or I really wanted to do this. It's like, that's cool. My bad, dude. I had no idea. And so Rule Zero conversations are super hard. And I think that's one of the things that pushed me to CEDH specifically was the ability to forego a lot of that and just play what I want to play. As long as it's within these constraints. Cool. If I want to go fast, I'm going to play fast. If I want to, go hard, I'm going to play these big creatures and do whatever. And as long as it wins, that's fine. So I think, that's a big thing that I think switches over a lot of players specifically is that idea of a Rule Zero conversation and it being just a lot easier because it's inherently understood.
For sure. That's a huge benefit of CDH is you avoid all that Rule Zero anxiety. Because again, whether you're having the conversation or not, then you might feel I should have had the conversation, or there's all these different ways to miss. Where in CDH, like there's not that many ways to miss. There's only a couple that we talked about. Oops, my commander wasn't quite strong enough. Oh well. And one thing I want to not fail to mention is I want just a quick tip for anybody who's wondering, like, how do I get that done? How do I make my Corval deck or whatever, my ETLE deck, whatever your deck is that you want to see if I can make this into a CDH deck? I recommend look at the deck list that are publicly available for CDH decks and that are in your color identity, maybe using your commander, maybe not. Look at both. If folks are using your commander in CDH, look at those. But just even in your color identity, the cards that are showing up over and over again in that color identity, do I have a valid reason why that card is not in my deck? Whether that's Dockside or Rhystic Study or Swords to Plowshares or whatever, and there's a bunch of cards we can name, Mana Crypt. And if the answer is no, I don't really have a valid reason why not, then it's like, okay, well maybe I'm either going to not play CDH or I got to get that card in my deck. Dockside, again, I can name sort of my top 10, but I could probably name another 10 and another 10 after that, depending on what your color identity is, where it's like you better have a good reason that that's not in there. And it's not going to get dull because there's still so much that goes on in gameplay when you have four different players sit down and your opening hand. There's so many different permutations that can happen. I promise you, it's not going to get stale. You're not going to, at least it hasn't yet for me, and I've played a ton of games with CDH at this point. But anyways, that's a little quick tip. Use those public lists as barometers for whether what you're doing is CDH and how to get it there if that's a place you want to go with your commander.
Absolutely. Yeah. Net decking is not a bad thing. Like this is a community that's really all trying, especially with competitive mindset in mind. Like you can't not everybody is going to be some brewing genius that is going to be able to sit and, make the next best thing. No, not everybody's Ian. You know what I mean? We can't just sit and look at a pile of cards, of 100 cards, and be like, yeah, that's going to be good. Not everybody can do that. Right. And that's fine because sometimes some people have just figured it out. Some people have figured out, okay, these are the best cards for this strategy at the moment, And so Yeah.
Do you think LeBron James makes the best basketball? I mean, do you think Peyton Manning would go manufacture the best football cleats? Like, you don't have to do everything, right? Even if you're used to that in other contexts, like there's a real sense in which once we've aligned on the goal is to win, the games are really strategic. There's a lot. I mean, none of us has mastered how to even talk about table talk and negotiating, let alone like keeping opening hand or mulliganing. None of us are pure 100% masters at any of that. And so, yeah, you don't feel like you have to do everything. And I'm not even saying you got to go net deck. What I'm saying is you got to at least use those to inform how you're building your deck. Again, it's just like it's at least a good sounding board, a good comparison point. But I think you're absolutely right. There's also no shame in, hey, I want to go play CDH. Okay, let me go play a deck that won the tournament 2 weeks ago. And you're going to be fine. You're going to have a lot of fun. You're going to learn a lot. So I agree with you 100%.
Awesome. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And sometimes just looking for inspiration in that sense too is good as well, because there's a lot of times you might not even know certain cards exist until you look at a deck with like a primer or anything and they're explaining why it's there. And you're like, oh, why didn't I think of that? Yeah. So
it's happened to me multiple times. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we've really, had a really great time with this topic. Real quick, though, I do want to talk mainly about our personal experiences. Has there been a deck for you, Matt, that you know, it doesn't have to be like your first ever CDH deck, but just a deck where you were like, I want to scale this up. I want to scale this down. You played at different power levels. Has that ever happened to you? And like, what were the steps that you went with it? Things like that.
Yeah, I've experienced this a number of times. Again, like I think my first foray into Commander, I aimed way too low because I was nervous about being the competitive player coming in. So that example sprung to mind first of like example where I missed low and felt bad because I wasn't really playing the games. I was a spectator. I said, yeah, I did something on my turn, but like it wasn't at the right power level. And so I had to face the choice of like start from scratch or try to level this up. And yeah, it's not like that's not something I have a lot of experience with. So I'm like not going to be the right person to advise on it, but I can say like that tension is very real. It's a tough problem. And I think that what helped me in those is actually like, you know, borrowing a deck from somebody who's in that play group. If I'm like, cause I'm more often a guest in those types of circles. And so actually, I'm probably better. I might be better served, and in fact, I had more fun when I borrowed a deck from somebody there. And then maybe if I plan on coming back 2 weeks from now, well, now at least I have some experience with what's going on, and so maybe next time I wouldn't have to borrow a deck because now I sort of know where to aim. That was sort of one of my initial experiences, and then when I figured out to borrow a deck, that went a little bit better. I mentioned sort of pre-cons and using that as like a bar everyone can get to, that sort of thing. So. A couple of like tricks that have helped me because really I didn't feel comfortable myself, like moving up and down the Commander power scale. So, you know, again, that's mostly me just expressing like discomfort with doing it. Not sure it's a direct answer to your question, but I found a ways to sidestep it by going into pre-cons or going into let me borrow a deck from somebody in the play group.
No, but I mean, that the answer to my question too, though, is like, okay, if you didn't have to scale, okay, how did you navigate that as well? Because I think the idea of like rule zero conversations and everything is such a prevalent topic, and like also one that gets a lot of people going because everybody has had an experience of them going into a pod, I think, and like either pub stomping everybody unintentionally and being like, oh man, I had no idea this deck was strong. Sorry guys. Or, you know, being underwhelmed with their performance because everybody else's deck was doing something that they couldn't perform at. I know you have to have a lot of humility going into any space you're not yet super comfortable with. So don't assume your deck is CDH because you always win in your local group or whatever for any reason. Don't assume you can competently play a deck that you just saw yesterday on the internet. Like you can't make the assumptions, but it's okay. Like you'll get there with a little bit. Like, give yourself a little bit of time and space to figure these things out. Don't make these assumptions.
people want to get there on the second of the first day that they do something like that. And so, that includes me too. I mean, I certainly showed up to CDH with all kinds of impressions that weren't quite right. Oh, this card from Legacy is going to be really good. It turns out it's not, whatever. Like, so you got to show up as a learner first to any new space, learn what's the right power level for that space, learn what players like or don't like to see across the table from them. If it isn't the CDH space, if it is a CDH space, you got other stuff to learn. So yeah, like I would just say, I'm not the right person to advise on all these issues, but I know enough to know what I don't know. I'm going to show up as a learner in those spaces and try to start gather information that first session, especially before I start to, try to lay down my own set of guidelines in that space that I'm entering for the first time.
Yeah, 100%. So that is about all of the time that we've got. Quick question to our listeners. What's a deck that you have scaled up, scaled down lately, and why? Let us know what it was initially, kind of what it was now, or what it is now, rather. And make sure to give us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast aggregator. You'd be surprised at how much it helps. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and more. All links are in the comments below. That wraps it up for this episode. Thank you so much, Matt, for being here. This was so much fun. Definitely got to do this again. I enjoyed picking your brain and talking to you. There's a lot of really great and insightful conversation, man. So thank you.
No, I really enjoyed it. We'll do it again soon, I hope. And if viewers have topics that they'd like to see you and I address, I mean, I'm open to ideas. So let me know, folks who are watching. But either way, whether it's our topic or theirs, I'd love to be back on. This is a lot of fun.
Absolutely, dude. Trust me, I'm looking at the calendar tonight. But yeah, absolutely, guys. Take care. Tune in next time when we talk more about our favorite format and our favorite game, Magic the Gathering. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we will see you next time.